It's a few minutes after sunrise on March 7th, 2026, and a car is crossing from Bucks County, Pennsylvania into Manhattan. Inside are two teenagers. One is 18, a high school senior from Langhorne. The other is 19 from Newtown. Neither has a criminal record, and a dash cam is recording every word they say. "All I know is I want to start terror, bro," one of them says. "I want to petrify these people." According to federal prosecutors, they talk through the plan in detail: who they're targeting, how it will go, how many people they expect to kill. 8 to 16, one of them estimates, maybe 30 to 60 if the crowd is big enough. Their destination is Gracie Mansion, the official residence of New York City's mayor. By that afternoon, prosecutors say lit homemade explosives were flying into a crowd of protesters on a Manhattan street. Nobody died, not because the plan was harmless, but because it failed. And then something almost as disturbing happened. 3 days later, one of the most recognizable news anchors in America looked into a camera and told millions of viewers a version of this story that was, in the words of a guest sitting right next to her, the complete reverse of what happened. But buried in this story is one detail almost nobody caught, and it proves this was never about one anchor having a bad night. This is about what you'll be told after the next attack. So let's go back to that street, because what actually happened there matters for everything that comes after. That Saturday, the sidewalk outside Gracie Mansion was already a powder keg. A right-wing provocateur named Jake Lang had called a rally under the banner, "Stop the Islamic Takeover of New York City." Across from it, a counter-protest had formed, calling itself "Run Nazis Out of New York City." Two crowds screaming at each other outside the home of the city's first Muslim mayor, Zohran Mamdani. And into that scene, prosecutors say, walked the two teenagers from the car. They had driven nearly 2 hours for this exact moment. According to police, they ignited their homemade devices and hurled them toward the anti-Islam protesters. The devices failed to fully detonate. NYPD officers were on them within moments. Both suspects were captured, photographed holding the devices, and hauled to the 19th precinct. Now, you might be thinking what plenty of people thought that first day. Maybe these were glorified smoke bombs, a stunt. Two dumb kids with fireworks. Hold that thought, because the answer arrived on Monday. NYPD Commissioner Jessica Tisch confirmed these were not smoke bombs and not hoaxes. They were real improvised explosive devices, capable of causing serious injury or death. Preliminary testing found one contained TATP, an explosive with a long history in international terrorism. Tisch said both suspects admitted they were inspired by ISIS and had been watching its propaganda. The FBI went further. These two allegedly wanted an attack bigger than the Boston Marathon bombing. Investigators say they found a notebook with detailed attack plans and a storage unit containing explosive residue and bomb-making materials. The federal charges came fast: terrorism, material support, use of a weapon of mass destruction, and on April 7th, a grand jury in the Southern District of New York indicted them both. Two suspects who pledged themselves to ISIS, a crowd of protesters, as the intended victims. A dashcam recording of the kill count they hoped for. That's the documented story. Hold on to every one of those details: the targets, the ideology, the numbers they said out loud in that car. Because the version of this story that was about to roll out of one of America's biggest newsrooms contained almost none of them. While federal prosecutors were building their case in Lower Manhattan, something very different was being built a few miles away, and it went public on Tuesday morning. Tuesday, March 10th. CNN posts to X, promoting its coverage of the attack. The post describes two Pennsylvania teenagers crossing into New York City for what could have been a normal day, enjoying the unusually warm weather, until, in less than an hour, their lives would drastically change because they'd be arrested for throwing homemade bombs at a protest. Read that framing again. The accused terrorists are the main characters. Their day is the tragedy. The crowd they allegedly tried to kill, and the 8 to 16 people, remember, maybe 60, barely exists in the sentence. One viral reply summed up the reaction: who writes this garbage? And that question, who actually wrote it, is going to matter a lot more than you think by the end of this video. The backlash wasn't a right-wing pile-on either. Reason, a libertarian outlet, compared the post to the Washington Post's infamous austere religious scholar headline about the death of ISIS leader al-Baghdadi. Robbie Soave tore into it on The Hills Rising. By 9:30 that morning, the post was gone. And then CNN did something networks almost never do. It admitted fault in writing. The network said the post failed to reflect the gravity of the incident and breached the editorial standards it requires for all of its reporting. Stop and appreciate that. CNN's own statement concedes its coverage of an attempted terror attack fell below its own standards. To be fair, CNN wasn't operating in a vacuum. The early information environment was a mess. Even Mayor Mamdani's initial statement was worded so ambiguously that, as Reason noted, it created confusion about whether the anti-Muslim protesters had thrown the bombs, when in reality, they were the targets. Sloppy framing was everywhere those first 48 hours. But here's the thing. That deleted post was not the version of this story CNN most needed to disappear. The worst version was still sitting on the network's own website that very morning, and it was quietly changing while nobody watched. Because a tweet, at least, can be deleted. What happened that same night couldn't be. It happened in prime time, on camera, in front of a live panel, and it came out of the mouth of one of CNN's biggest stars. Tuesday night, CNN News Night. Abby Phillip, the face of the network's flagship panel show, opens her program and tells the audience what this story is about. An attempted terror attack, she says, against New York's mayor, Zohran Mamdani. And she doesn't present it as breaking chaos. She presents it as an indictment of Republicans, two of them saying Muslims don't belong here after an attack on a Muslim mayor, while House Speaker Mike Johnson says nothing to condemn it. There's just one problem. That is not what happened. The suspects were not anti-Muslim extremists hunting a Muslim mayor. They were, by their own alleged admission to police, ISIS-inspired attackers, and their targets were the anti-Islam protesters. The victim and the villain swapped on national television. Maybe it was a one-time slip of the tongue? No. According to the clip that went viral that night, she said it again roughly 25 minutes into the program. Twice. Once at the open, once mid-show. These are scripted, produced segments, which suggests this framing didn't just fall out of one anchor's mouth. It passed through writers and producers and a teleprompter without a single person catching it, and then it spread to the panel. Ana Navarro told viewers the attack was against Mayor Mamdani, who was raised Muslim, and that's when the humiliation arrived, on CNN's own air. Panelist Joe Borelli cut in with the correction the network's own staff hadn't made. It was an attack on protesters, people protesting Mamdani, and framing it as an anti-Muslim attack, he said, would actually completely reverse what happened. The clip exploded across social media. The backlash was so intense that the next night, Phillip did something anchors dread. She looked into the camera and corrected herself, acknowledging the bombs were thrown by ISIS-inspired attackers into a crowd of anti-Muslim protesters, not targeted at Mayor Mamdani. She apologized. Credit where due, she owned it. But by then, the false version had already aired twice in prime time. And here's what should really stop you. The most damning apology in this entire story didn't come from Abby Phillip. It didn't come from CNN at all. And it definitely didn't come from a Republican. Which brings us to the part they really did not want getting out. His name is Brad Lander, Democrat, former comptroller of New York City, currently running for Congress. Not a Fox News contributor, not a conservative influencer, a senior figure in New York Democratic politics. In the hours after the attack, Lander publicly claimed the bombs were targeting Zohran Mamdani. There was no evidence for that. And when the facts caught up with him, he had to walk it back in public. "I'm sorry for jumping to conclusions and posting too soon," he wrote, adding that he wasn't sorry for hating Islamophobia as much as he hates anti-Semitism. Take the apology at face value, but notice what it confirms. A Democratic congressional candidate admitting, in his own words, that he pushed a false version of a terror attack because he jumped to the conclusion he wanted. Now line up everything you've seen. The social media post that turned alleged bombers into sympathetic teenagers. The primetime broadcast that flipped the target of the attack twice. A second panelist repeating it. A Democratic politician pushing the same false claim. According to JNS, CNN ended up issuing at least 3 separate corrections for 3 separate claims that the bombs were aimed at the mayor. 3 corrections, 1 story, 1 direction. And that's the tell. Honest mistakes scatter. Some flatter one side, some the other. These didn't scatter. Every single error, from the tweet to the anchor desk to the campaign trail, bent the same way, away from ISIS-inspired suspects targeting protesters toward a cleaner story about a Muslim mayor under attack. That pattern suggests something worse than sloppiness. It suggests a newsroom and a political class that decided what the story was before they checked what the story was. It even infected the cleanup. When CNN posted its correction, users on X slapped reader-added context on the correction itself. The correction needed a correction. So when you put all of this together, there's really only one conclusion left, and it runs straight through the one detail I told you about at the very beginning. The detail that proves this was never about one bad tweet, or one bad night, or one anchor. It was sitting in plain sight the whole time. And here it is, the part they were hoping you'd never put together. That deleted tweet everyone laughed at, it wasn't some intern freelancing on social media. It was promoting CNN's own published article. And the article's original opening was written the same way. It described the suspect's arrest as the moment their trajectory took a dark turn. Their trajectory. Two men who allegedly told a dashcam they wanted to start terror and killed dozens, framed like promising kids whose day went sideways. CNN didn't delete that one. It quietly scrubbed the opening paragraph and attached an editor's note. And then came the cherry on top. CNN's own media analyst, Brian Stelter, criticized the tweet, but assured everyone the story itself was solid. And readers immediately noticed the solid story was carrying an editor's note precisely because it had originally read just like the tweet. The tweet wasn't the disease, the tweet was the symptom. The article was written that way. The broadcast was scripted that way. The politician posted that way. Narrative first, facts on appeal. You watched the whole chain in this video. The dashcam confession, the normal day tweet, the primetime reversal, the Democrats' forced apology, and finally, the quiet edit that proves it was systemic. Most people saw one viral clip. You now know more about how this story was manufactured than most of the people who watched it happen on cable news. Here's the verdict. A newsroom that has to correct itself 3 times in one direction isn't making mistakes, it's making choices. Videos like this take time to dig out, so if you want the next one the moment it drops, subscribe and turn the bell on. And drop a comment below. What was the moment in this video where it clicked for you? Because it started with 2 teenagers in a car saying exactly what they wanted to do, out loud, on tape. The hardest part of this story should never have been getting the news to repeat it.